you install Kitty with package manager of your distribution, and the package is called Kitty. And then you can just run it by running Kitty. And when Kitty opens for the first time, it will be just this black screen in the shell you have defined for your user. I'm using fish, so it's opened it fish. The config file for Kitty will be installed in your home folder .config and folder Kitty. And if there is no config file in your folder, you just go to Kitty and press Ctrl F2, and it will automatically create template for your Kitty conf, and it will open it in, this is VI if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Anyway, you will get kittyconf file, which pretty much it has all commented, but here you have, I think, all the options, or at least most of them, which you can put in Kitty. And this has more than 2,500 lines, so I'm not gonna use that file. I will just duplicate it and call this one original, just in case I need to go and look for some option. And I will open this one and delete everything so we can start from scratch. The first thing I would do is to just define the shell that I'm gonna use for Kitty. It will be, of course, fish, but if you want to have, I don't know, Kitty open in fish shell and Alacrity open in ZSH shell, this is how you define shell in Kitty. You just type in shell user bin fish, and this is the path to your shell. If I type in, you can see this is the location of my shell. If I was to run, for instance, ZSH, it's the same. I could just replace this with ZSH, save. And the way you reload your Kitty config is by pressing Ctrl F5. It won't change the shell though. As you can see, now that I restarted it, it tries to run the ZSH configuration, for which I don't care, but that's another story. Let me just turn this to fish. The next thing you might want to change is your modifier key. By default, this is Ctrl-Shift. This is the line how you define your modifier. So for instance, if I want to enter another window, I just press Ctrl-Shift-Enter. I can put this to Alt, save it, reload configuration, and now Alt-Enter opens another window. And Kitty calls new terminals windows, but I will leave it as it is so it doesn't interfere with my other shortcuts. With that out of the way, the next thing I want to do is change the theme so it's not this black. And in Kitty you can change theme with running kitten theme. Kittens are like a little programs inside of Kitty terminal. There is not many of them, but this is for changing themes, for instance. You can search with backslash, and I will just search for Cappuccino Mocha. Then you if you want to select the theme, you press enter and enter again. Now it asks you how you want to save your theme. I will just choose this first line, so I will press M. If you want something else, you can just press the first letters of every sentence. And as you can see, my theme is already applied, and in my Kitty config there is a new file, current theme, and in Kitty conf file it automatically added this line for the theme. And if you want to edit something in the theme, you just change it here. As you can see here, you have a lot of options. I'm happy with this, so I will just leave it as it is and save it. And the next thing you want to probably do is change the font. Font you can define with these lines. The name of the font has to be exactly like it's written here. So I'm using, for instance, Heck Nerd font. So this is the name of my font. And if your font has other families, so to say, you can just put them here. And when you are done with defining your fonts, you can just save the file, Ctrl-Shift-F5. And as you can see, it already changed my font. The next thing I want to do is to define the font size, and I will make it 16 just so it's easier for you to see. And if I reload, you can see it's already changed. And by this point, all I need is a little bit transparency, and you define it with this command. So if I save the file, you have to restart Kitty for this one, and as you can see, it's very transparent. This is a little more that I wanted. Maybe I should put 95. Yeah, that's much better. And here you have already good looking terminal in my opinion, but there is more. Kitty is actually a terminal multiplexer like Tmax, so you can open open new windows, as Kitty calls them, or should I say new terminals, inside of the Kitty terminal. So you can press modifier key and enter, and it will by default open new terminal below. And if you create new terminal again, it will just take them. So this is a layout that Kitty has by default. Of course, you can change those layouts. With the modifier L, you can circle through layouts. So this was default. This is, I think, grid. This is actually layout where if you have multiple terminals open, they are in sort of background. Then there is this layout. And now we are at the beginning. So again, you go to modifier key L to set up which one you want. I don't like this to be my default, so I'm gonna change that. To see the options of what kind of layouts you can define, you can go to their page under layouts, and here you can see how every layout is called. I will put this tool to be by default, and for that I need to just copy this line, save it, and refresh it. If you just put this line, when you press modifier and L, you won't be able to change to any other layout. If you want to be able to change to different layout, you have to define them here. So this will be the default, but you will still have the option to circle through all of them. And then when you save it, refresh it, I can again circle through all the layouts, but the tall one will always be the default. So now that you have this terminal, you might want a little gaps between terminals, and Kitty has the options for that. To set a margin between these terminals or windows, you can define window margin width and put some number. So if I save it and refresh it, you can see there is a gap between all those terminals, which this is a little too much. So if I make it smaller, this is a little better. You can also see that there are borders around active and inactive windows. And looking at this, it's not very visible. So I will make borders a little more thicker. And to change the thickness, you can just add this line. I will put all these commands on my GitHub page, and you will have a link to go straight to that file, so don't worry. So if I set window border with 2 points, and if I refresh it, you can see now that the border is a little thicker, and yes, now lines are not lined up correctly either, but if I maximize the window, they are just fine. So that's another thing that you can take into consideration. But let's say you have just one single window and you don't want your prompt to be moved. For instance, if you have power line prompt or whatever it's called, where you have thin lines, you don't want to have this margin. So you can change this with, if you have a single window, margin width will be 0. And now, as you can see, my prompt moved to the beginning. Another nice thing is that you can change the background of the kitty into a photo. So for instance, if I go to my wallpaper folder, this is one more option that I forget in my dolphin video. If you don't have folders here, which you can get with F9, you can always go here at the beginning and you can see all your bookmarks here. So in order to set a background for kitty as a photo, the photo must be in PNG format. And I have this photo as a PNG. Let me just define the background. So I just take the name of that photo and I add it to this line background image and the path to your image. Save it, and now just reload the configuration. And as you can see, you can have an image and transparent background, and this all looks a little too much, so I will just turn the opacity to 0. I can just comment this out, and now I can see a little better. So this image is really not visible in whole. As you can see, this is the image. The way you change that is that you add the line background image layout scaled, and now when you save it and reload it, the image will fit the size of your terminal. And now if you open another terminal, or should I say window, you can see, and for instance I just ran a command, I can see that fonts are not visible as much. So what you can do is define the tint of the picture itself, so to say. So what you can do is add background tint and define how much percent you want to see. So if I restart now, this is a little more visible. I can even make it more tinted. Now the terminal windows are a little more to see, but now I don't see the whole my picture. So what I can do is to change this gap color. So I add this line, save it, and now when I restart the configuration, you can see that only the terminals are tinted and the picture behind it is normal. This is very nice. The other nice feature that Kitty has are tabs. You open a new tab with modifier key and T. And down here you can see the tabs that you have opened. I don't like this look, so you can change that, of course. So you can add this line and you can see this will change now to like power line prompt, but I don't like that one either. So what you can do is change this style to add tab power line style, or should I say this style, to slanted, save it, restart. To me this is nicer look. You can change between tabs with your mouse, or you can just press modifier key and left and right arrows. To create another tab, you just press Ctrl Shift T. To close a tab, you can just click your modifier and Q. For instance, if I have multiple windows open, I can just press Q and it will close all of them. So let's say you have multiple windows open. You change between those windows, either you click on them or with your keyboard, you press modifier key and brackets. You can also map your own keys. For instance, if I want to map a key, I just type in map, the key that I want to map, and then the command. All these commands you can find on their page. So here I mapped F11 to open a new window in the same folder as my current window in Kitty. So when I save it, restart the configuration, and now when I press F1, it will open another terminal in the same folder as this one. So for instance, I can map my F2 to open VI in my current directory, but in a new terminal. And when I save the config file, restarted the config and press F2, you can see it opened another terminal and gave me the option which file I can open in this folder, and when I choose the file, just press enter and your file is open. And when you are quick editing it, you just feed the file, you save it or whatever, and it automatically closes that terminal and you are back where you were. This is pretty useful if you just quickly want to edit some file and just go on with your business. There is one thing that I find it useful, and that is in the tabs. You can put this line, tab by activity symbol, and I put like a star. And for instance, here I will just run the free command on my root, and you can see it's running. And when I go to another tab, you will have a little star here, or should I say the symbol that you defined here. And as you can see, while it was running, there was a command written in here, and now it's just a folder, but the star is still here. This is very useful if, for instance, you run a command or a script or something else that takes a long time, and then you switch to another tab, and in the meantime you forget that you even run that thing. Star will always make you click on that tab and see what happened. And as soon as I pressed on the tab, the star is gone, meaning that you saw the output of that window, and now it no longer needs to remind you to go back to that window. So this is pretty much some basic commands that you can add to your Kitty config. And for more options, you can go to their page, because there is a really lot of options and there is no way I can just go through all of them. If you have some useful option that you put in your config file, please let me know in the comments down below. I really want to know. We can always learn something new. And that's all.